Hello and a very warm welcome to Conversations in Craft. I'm Becky Metcalfe, Head of Content at Design Centre Chelsea Harbour. The Design Centre supports creative expression across the design agenda, and today's virtual session is particularly apt as it coincides with Artefact, our first new contemporary craft fair. With craft making its mark on interior design, Artefact will be an opportunity to discover, learn, connect, and gain a greater understanding of how one-of-a-kind designs are conceived and made. Broadening specialist knowledge, the Conversation and Craft series will offer insider insights from the craft industry's leading lights. We're bringing together renowned experts, from gallerists to makers and curators, for some great conversations, both physically and online. For this virtual session, I'm simply delighted to introduce Alberto Cavalli, Executive Director of the Michelangelo Foundation. The renowned international organisation celebrates and preserves master craftsmanship and strengthens its connection to the world of design. We are honoured that it is an event partner for Artefact. And who better to moderate the session than writer and podcaster Grant Gibson. Over to you, Grant, and thank you so much for tuning in.
Hello, thank you very much for joining us, and welcome to the second of Artefact's digital talks. As I'm sure many of you are aware, Artefact is a new high-end gallery-led contemporary craft fair that's running at Design Centre Chelsea Harbour from the 22nd to the 29th of June. The talks programme is a chance to investigate some of the issues the craft world faces, looking at subjects such as the future of the market, diversity, and the importance of beauty. My name is Grant Gibson. I'm a writer, editor, and host of the Material Matters podcast, and it gives me huge pleasure to be chewing the fat over the next 30 minutes or so with the excellent Alberto Cavalli. Alberto is Executive Director of the Michelangelo Foundation and Chief Curator of the not-for-profit institution's cultural event, Homophobia, Crafting a More Human Future, which will take place in Venice next April. Not content with all that, he's also a prolific writer and an academic. Ostensibly, we're here to be talking about craft's relationship with the environment and asking whether it is inherently sustainable, but I have a feeling the conversation might be rather more nebulous than that. Alberto, how are you?
I'm very well, thank you very much. And I'm very pleased to be here.
Good, I'm glad to hear it. I mean, I think for people watching this, maybe who don't know, it'd be good to talk a little bit in the first instance about the Michelangelo Foundation for Creativity and Craftsmanship. So yeah, maybe you can give us some background to the foundation and what it does.
The Michelangelo Foundation is a private non-for-profit institution which has been created 5 years ago in Geneva, in Switzerland, by two entrepreneurs, Mr. Johan Rupert, a South African luminaire of business, and a very generous donor to several different causes, and the Italian Franco Cologni, past president of Cartier. The two gentlemen have been working together for many years. And 5 years ago or so, they decided to join forces to protect, promote, and preserve something that they felt could really create important conditions for the integrity of the development of the young generation, fine crafts.
I mean, why did they decide to do that, Alberto?
Because both do love the beautiful things crafted with heart. But I said things, but maybe it's not the right term to describe objects that are made with the utmost care, attention, and passion by the most talented and skilled artisans. Rather than say things, maybe we should say goods. Don't we say luxury goods in the end? Already in the choice of the words that we use to identify what we care for is already an intuition about what lies behind their value. A thing is not a good. A thing you can dispose of, but something which is a good is something which is dear to your heart. So already to create the cultural and environmental, I would say, conditions to identify objects that are not disposable, that are not made just to fulfill shelves that are already so piled with things, but that rather express a passion, a vision, the identity of a territory. This is already a small revolution, but it's a very important shift of a mindset. And that's why the foundation was created. It's a cultural foundation. So we work on a change of culture.
Okay, so they wanted to start a small cultural revolution, and your role in this small cultural revolution is what?
Well, you know, every important revolution always started from the top, actually, because if you don't invite people to change their mind, you don't go very far. My role in this, well, being Italian and being a Catholic, let me quote Pope Benedict, I'm a poor servant in the vineyard of the Lord. So my role in this, well, I'm the executive director, so I manage a great team of 10 persons in Geneva, and we develop original projects. We collaborate with a number of like-minded institutions throughout Europe, also to create a common language so that we can understand each other when we talk about craft. Because if we talk about craft in the UK, something comes up in your mind. But if you talk about craft in Hungary or North Europe or in Malta, so many different facets come into the light. So already helping to create a common language paves the way to a better understanding.
Interesting, because I was going to ask you about, you're from Milan, obviously, and I was going to ask you about the difference in perception of craft in Italy to the UK.
I would say that if this country for centuries has been really the cradle of the production of the finest, of the most beautiful artisanal things, the Italian cities of the Renaissance, were the suppliers of all the crowned heads in Europe at the time. In the past, I would say 50 years, we have assisted to a worrying decrease of interest from the young generation to all the artisanal professions. While in the UK, it is my perception that around the idea of craft, you have federated a number of positive perceptions. Craft is connected to contemporary production. Craft is part of the creative industries. Craft is an expression that allows people to give the best they can in a number of various fields. Craft attracts young talent. In Italy, up to, I would say, 20 years ago, this was completely out of the radar. So even if 95% of the Italian companies are small to medium companies, and even if this small country, we are 60 million, is still visible on the world panorama, because here we are still able to produce something that is quite different, quite outstanding, something that makes people's hearts beat faster. But nevertheless, it seems like we have not given enough value and importance to those who were and are at the heart of this difference in the production, the master craftsmen. Only through a constant communication about the role of these artisans are we seeing some change.
See, that's quite interesting, because I think in the UK, our perception of Italy and its relation with craft is that it's much more embedded in industry in a way that possibly it isn't here, and that you have a much closer relationship to craft. I think we've gone through a kind of renaissance in the past 15 years, or at least a renewal of interest in craft and making things by hand. We can maybe go into reasons for that later. But what you're saying is that the generation coming through, the younger people, aren't as interested in craft as maybe their forefathers were.
Certainly. I would say that, my generation, I'm 46 years old, my generation, we missed it. But the new generation, I think they're called the We Gen Z or something like that, hopefully they are looking at craft, they are looking at ability, they are looking at these skills with a more attentive eye. So rather than considering, intellectual jobs in brackets as the only and ultimate goal in their lives, this young generation now looks at the human ability to take elements that anybody can have at disposal and to transform them into something outstanding.
So why have they become more interested in making again, Alberto? What's the reason for that?
I think that certainly because in the last 10 years, if I'm not wrong, we have tried to put again manual skills and ability and authenticity at the center of any consideration. We grew up in the late 90s and in the early 2000s when the keyword was like glamorous, or it was like liberation years, years of growth, and everything had to be sexy, from shows to frozen chicken at the supermarket. That, I think, after
frozen chickens were sexy. How did frozen chickens become sexy?
I think it was like glamorous, tried to make it glamorous as well. So, to paint a patina of maybe kitsch even onto something that was quite banal. I think the crisis of the year 2008 and 9 put a challenge to that, so that more and more brands of any kind understood that if they wanted to sell their goods at those very high prices, they needed something more than a sensual glam. They needed values, authenticity, and to reveal what was hiding behind that success, the skillful hands of the master artisans. That was a very important shift, I think.
So, talking about glam, you started your career in the press office of Dolce & Gabbana.
Yes.
In the marketing team. I mean, why did you decide to leave that industry? When did your interest in craft develop personally?
It has always been present in me because, Dolce & Gabbana is still a family company, family-owned company that employs many, many artisans for the couture shows, for the tailoring. So, working with the designers and with the artisans for me was incredibly interesting. But then, every big change happens when there is an important meeting or encounter. Like Oprah Winfrey would say, when you hear your true calling. In my case, the calling came from Franco Cologni, who asked me if I wanted to join his small Italian foundation, the Fondazione Cologni. To move from such an important brand like Dolce & Gabbana to be working with Italian artisans was a big change, but a change that I will never regret, because Mr. Cologni offered me the opportunity to really develop a human relationship with them. And what is so important for me about craft is humanity, is the faces, the dreams, the expectations, the talent, the ability, sometimes also the stubbornness, if so I can say, of the master craftsman. But that's what makes it so interesting and makes you feel part of it, rather than being a passive consumer of contents. You become an active creator of something with the power of the dialogue.
I mean, I said this talk will be nebulous. We're supposed to be talking about sustainability, so maybe I should move us slightly gently onto that. I mean, is craft inherently sustainable, Alberto, in your view? Is it part of the answer to climate crisis?
Let me just make a little step behind. Before we were talking about a common language. In order to do so, we investigated for 2 years the words, the values that should always recur when we talk about excellence in craft. So authenticity, originality, blah, blah, blah. Around this constellation of values, we are trying to build a common language. The same should be applied to the concept of sustainability. If you ask me, is craft sustainable? Yes and no. Yes, because the artisans are connected to their territories. They make their territories come alive. They have always been extremely attentive to reduce waste, to protect the environment where they work, etc. No, not necessarily, because there are some crafts that are still very energy consuming, etc. But my question is, are we sure that this definition of sustainability encompasses all? A world without dreams, is it sustainable? A world without diversity, is it sustainable? A world dominated by homologation, banal objects, and nihilism, finally, is it sustainable? I think it's not. And I do believe that the artisans and craft can play a pivotal role in making sure that this diversity always blooms into something that we might not necessarily need. We don't purchase it, we don't order, we don't commission it because we need it, but because it's so much different from anything we've seen. You fall in love with someone because they're different, don't you? And in the end, you know, what is beautiful will always make you fall in love.
Is beauty, I mean, this is quite interesting because this is a subject of one of our talks later in Artifact. I mean, is beauty enough though? Do makers need to think about their other wider responsibilities? I mean, because you mentioned it, I mean, since we're talking about it, you know, many crafts processes are extractive. Glass requires sand. It requires huge amounts of energy, for instance. Clay comes from the earth. Is it indulgent just to make beautiful things?
Certainly not, because Francois Cheng, the French philosopher, put it in a very clear way when he said that beauty, to be authentic, must have a sense. And sense has three exceptions. Meaning, if it's not meaningful, it's not beautiful. So already to give a meaning to something means to reason about it, to give it a depth. Sense also means sensation. You have to feel it, touch it, smell it. You have to live it, otherwise it will not touch you. But sense also means direction. There is a beauty that can fascinate you, but that's like smoke in your eyes, because it will not lead you to the right place, but to the wrong one. It's a beauty that can charm you, but that hides horror stories, stories of aggression to the environment. So is beauty enough? No, when it's not authentic in this sense. Think about Milady the Winter. Think Cersei Lannister from the Game of Thrones. Was she beautiful? Yes. Was her beauty authentic? No, according to Francois Cheng, because she used it like Medusa, you know, to petrify and take life away from you. At the same time,
I never thought we'd mention Game of Thrones in this conversation, but that's good to know.
Yeah, we can also say the Three Musketeers with Milady the Winter, if that's Indeed. More, you know, upscale.
No, I'm fine with the Game of Thrones. That's absolutely fine.
Good.
I mean, in your book, when you're defining things and finding a common language in that case, and since we're into this subject, did you make an effort to define beauty, I wonder? And what beauty is and the context of beauty?
It's an effort that I make constantly because I am a professor at the design faculty of Milan's Politecnico University. And the subject that I teach is called Italian Beauty and Crafts. So that's my role, to try and explain to the 70 or something young students that I have every year how to encompass in their own creative code that special kind of genetic code that is imbued in what we normally define beautiful or Italian beauty. Because if you do not know, for instance, what the artisans can make for you, because nobody invites you to discover the techniques, the opportunities, the workshops, very simply, your creativity is limited. While if we invite you to discover how multifaceted contemporary beauty can be, also thanks to the opportunities offered by master craftsmen who, you know, every time that you propose them something new or something unseen, well, maybe they are quite unhappy, like in Murano, when you go to the master glass makers and they tell you, oh, non c'è pas, it's impossible to do that. But in the end, they do it. If you have a respectful approach, they long to encounter the zeitgeist. Otherwise, they keep repeating the same things again and again, but that's always been out of the idea of craft. So beauty is also a continuous reinvention of the codes of what is contemporary. And I love to use this word, contemporary, which is not modern, which is not in fashion. Contemporary is always that it's something that always stays with us, even through the passing of time, because it reflects those values that we put in it when we make it, when we think about it, when we own it, when we pass it to someone else.
I mean, certainly in the UK, the rise of craft is often compared to the food industry. There's a certain type of consumer who's increasingly interested in provenance, you know, where things come from, how they're made or how they're produced. While at the same time, we've seen levels of obesity rising, fried chicken joints opening on every other street corner. Don't know if you have this kind of thing in Milan, by the way. I mean, food in some senses has become part of our culture wars. So I guess my question to you is, is craft, your take on craft, is it something that's purely for elites?
Certainly not, because I do believe that if luxury can be, something that only maybe a few can afford, but excellence is something that, thank God, can be provided to everybody. If you go to have a coffee in Via Monte Napoleone, you paid €1.50. Is it luxury? No, but it's excellent. So, it's because you drink it in a fine porcelain cup and saucer in a beautiful atmosphere. And craft offers such a wide range of opportunities also to purchase. Then, is craft expensive? Yes, it is. But does this make craft exclusive? No. On the contrary, craft is one of the most inclusive worlds I know, because whomever comes with talent, with an idea, with opportunities, they find fertile ground for experimentation. And it's a thing you don't normally find, up to the point that the word craft has now been applied, you were mentioning food, has now been applied to a number of also industrially made things that have little in common with craft, but that use the universe, the symbolic universe of craft, for a patente de noblesse they don't necessarily deserve. So you enter into a cafeteria and say, oh, this coffee has been crafted for you.
Yes, from Starbucks. It's a marketing tool, right?
It's a marketing tool. Is this good or bad for us? It's a question.
Yeah. Well, and what side of the debate do you come down on? Is it good or bad?
I think the counselor of King Francis I of France, Gabriel Naudet, said, "Cum vulpe vulpinarer," with the fox, you have to be like a fox. So, when you encounter someone with such a smart attitude, you have to be smart as well. So try to take out the best you can from the situation without letting it jeopardize you. So everybody talks about craft. Good. 20 years ago, nobody talked about craft. Do they always speak on purpose? Are they always on point when they talk about it? No. This gives us the opportunity to establish a kind of a perimeter of what could be encompassed in the field of craft. So it allows us to ignite a debate about this by being federative and by looking for like-minded institutions or people who share our values and our vision to make our voice heard, finally. So there is a good point in this widespread use of the word craft, in a way.
Well, so can craft be successfully democratized, do you think? I mean, is that one of the foundation's aims?
I truly think so. I truly think so, because artisans are always looking to listen to you. So according to what is your budget, what is your dreams, what are your expectations, the good thing about a crafted object is that not necessarily it comes out in series, in big stocks, and take it or leave it, but that in your dialogue with the artisan, you can maybe arrive to something that you're looking for. And with the Homophobia guide, we are really inviting people to discover the workshop just all around of where you are. Open that door, because sometimes you say, oh no, I don't go to a tailor's shop workshop because that will be too expensive. Try and go. Maybe it's going to be more expensive than you think, maybe not, but start a dialogue and see what can come from it. So yes, I think craft can be democratized, because we should all learn how to invest our resources much better. It's banal to say buy less and spend better. I know it's banal. That's not necessarily the point. The point is, do you want to touch something, wear something, live surrounded by something that inspires you thoughts of beauty, of humanity that, evokes memories and stories to tell. Like when you invite friends and say, "Oh, love that," and you can start telling a story. What story can you tell about banal objects that, like Soetsu Yanagi said, even if you produce more and more and more, they generate more poverty, because at their basis there's not beauty, ugliness, a banal thought, repetitivity, and maybe also kitsch. This is one of the enemies we should be fighting. Two enemies: kitsch and ignorance.
It seems to me repair has quite an important role to play in all this. Does repair have a role in the foundation? Because if we're buying fewer things, which is banal, I grant it, but if we're buying fewer things that are more expensive, we need to look after them better, right?
Yes, but actually it's the care that you put in what's around you that also makes them so precious. Like, the Little Prince has been teaching us since we were children. So yes, repair from, the whole range of products. We have co-produced the publication of a book called Artwork, dedicated to the restoration of contemporary art. But very simply, contemporary art is booming, but artists are very often using techniques, materials that not necessarily they perfectly master. So after 5 years, some artworks run the risk of collapsing or disappearing. Maybe for the artist it's fine because, cupio di solvi, life is ephemeral, and my artwork is as well. But if you have spent 2 million euros for that artwork, I'm not sure the collector agrees with that. Or if you have used public money because you're a museum collector, are you sure you don't want to safeguard it? So from the restoration of contemporary art down to or up to the repair of what is dear for you, this certainly has a sense. And artisans always know how to, bring life back into something that's important for you.
Very good, very good. We're coming to the end of our time, Alberto, sadly. But what's next for you and the foundation? You have a major event, Homophobia, happening in April in Venice. Fingers crossed we'll all be traveling by then. Yes. I mean, what can visitors expect at that, I wonder?
Homophobia will be taking place again in the beautiful premises of the Giorgio Cini Foundation in Venice, between its rooms, cloisters, and gardens. We have a great curatorial team, including Judith Clark, Naoto Fukasawa, Michele De Lucchi, Stefano Boeri, and so on and so forth. All of them have developed for us an original point of view on the different facets of crafts and interior decoration, crafts and the transmission of know-how, and so on and so forth. So each one of the 16 exhibitions Homophobia is composed of will be revealing something new about the contemporary applied arts, the contemporary métier d'art, and what we normally think about crafts, really encompassing a variety of meanings. The guest of honor will be Japan, with its national living treasures. So the subtitle is Living Treasures of Europe and Japan. Also in our company, tucked away in the territories, we do have many of our living treasures. Homophobia wants to celebrate their talents, their skill, and their determination, because you have to be courageous to be an artisan nowadays.
And you have the Homophobia directory as well. What's the thinking? I mean, you've touched on it, but what's the thinking behind that?
The Homophobia guide, which I invite everybody to download, was introduced last September to offer to all of those who either have the possibility of traveling around Europe, or maybe in their own city want to discover some unknown addresses, to find the most interesting artisanal workshops. Last Friday, we have reached 1,000 artisanal workshops present on the Homophobia guide in 30 European countries. All the content is original, so developed by us, written by us. Every selection has been made thanks to either institutions that suggested which artisans were the most suitable for the guide, or by city ambassadors that in every city open their secret carnet d'adresse to let us know which atelier can be the most interesting.
Very good. So when we are able to travel again, that's what we should all be looking at. Alberto, Alberto, thank you so much for your time. I really appreciate it.
Thank you so much for inviting me. Thank you very much. Goodbye.
It's a complete pleasure. And do remember, everybody, Artifact is running at Design Centre, Chelsea Harbour from the 22nd to 29th of June. Do go along if you have the chance. Thank you very much.